I think I found a way to become invincible in real life. And not only will it blow your mind, but in order for me to test it, I was gonna have to go through a crazy amount of pain and training. So pay attention, because it all started in San Francisco when I challenged my friend to an insane fitness challenge and just barely lost. Doing well isn't enough for me. I want to be the best. So I needed to become so mentally tough that I was practically invincible and beat him. So I came up with a plan. In 1 week, I was gonna fly back down to challenge him again, which means that was the amount of time I had to become invincible. And let me explain exactly what I mean by that. You may have seen in movies that some people are so tough they can survive anything, but those movies aren't real, at least not yet. And while it's cool to see someone take on the world and feel no pain, for the average person, pain holds us back. Sometimes for good reasons, but sometimes if we could just push through, we could unlock something that we didn't know we had. So to put this theory to the test, I decided to train in one of the hardest, most painful sports I could think of. And on the first day, not only did I realize how intense this was actually gonna be, but I decided to train and actually have a real fight in a few days for the first time in my life. But at this time, I didn't even know that later in the day, I had something else coming for me. First, take note at how hard I'm going during this workout. I was giving it everything I had.
How you feeling?
I knew that if I were gonna beat my friend, I had to. I'd already got everything set up for a rematch. My flights and hotels were booked for the next week and everything was paid for. This meant that I was forced to train hard, that there was nothing that was gonna stop me from becoming mentally invincible, and nothing was gonna stop me in beating him in whatever challenge he decided to throw at me. But this is where something unexpected happened. Although I just went my hardest at the boxing gym, I noticed I had a slight cough. Apparently, I had COVID. I had so much stuff planned. Alright, we're gonna have to cancel the trip, cancel the boxing lessons. And if you think COVID is gonna stop me from becoming the toughest man on this planet, you're wrong. It might be minus 40 out, but I'm gonna go on a run when we get home. I knew that I was gonna be spending the next week in quarantine, but I also knew that nothing was gonna stop me from accomplishing my goal.
It's literally so cold. This is freezing from the inside.
As soon as I was able to, I decided to get back to training. And this is where things started to get a lot more challenging, because now I was training for two separate things. Obviously, I was training to toughen my mind to be able to handle anything that was thrown at me. But during that process, I was training for an actual boxing match between me and my other friend. And I've never taken a hit before or even thrown a punch. So this is my friend Paul, who is going to be training alongside with me. We both have no boxing experience, but he's a lot stronger than me. So somehow, I had 6 days to get really good at boxing to take on an opponent that had a huge advantage. And not only taking a punch, but potentially taking several in the fight and allowing myself to be beat up in the process, while simultaneously toughening my mind to be prepared for a challenge down in San Francisco that I didn't even know what it was, but supposedly was harder than the one that I lost last time. So is this all possible? I don't really know yet, but at this point, you can start to see that I'm making some improvement. We'd been working with the trainer to improve my reaction time and learn some of the basics and fundamentals of boxing. But remember that challenge I said I lost last time? Well, that's what you see here, which is a rigorous test consisting of 4 exercises, doing 87 push-ups, 110 crunches, doing as many pull-ups as you can in a row, and a 3-mile run all as fast as you can. So to make these days even harder on myself, I decided to try this challenge every day to see if I would improve there as well. And the goal of this is not to beat any records, but to push myself so hard every single day that I'm just used to being so far out of my comfort zone and be able to handle and win any challenge thrown at me and get closer to becoming mentally invincible. By this point, you've heard me talking about becoming invincible a lot, but let me explain exactly what I mean.
See, you hear all the times I've whipped myself from the rope.
I came across a really cool event that happened back in the Vietnam War. And by cool, I mean interesting, but it's really, really dark. There was a group of monks at the time that were protesting the government. You're gonna hear more about monks because they've made some really cool discoveries. But there was one monk in particular that did something that shocked everyone.
And it's only gonna get worse because we're gonna have to get hit.
In protest, he sat down in the middle of a public street and burned himself alive. But the crazy part is that during that entire time, he didn't flinch or show any signs of pain. Now, obviously, he felt pain, but his ability to not react to arguably one of the most painful things a person can experience shows that with practice, the person can learn to not let pain affect them. Which is why, as I counted down the days getting closer to the fight, I did everything I could to subject myself to pain, and I was improving. At the beginning of this challenge, I went in not knowing how to throw a proper punch. So after learning the fundamentals, I started to put together some combinations. Everything at this point was starting to feel a lot more natural. But there was still a problem. Every time I trained, I was still training with Paul, which meant as I was improving, he was improving too. And this fight didn't go as expected, but we were determined to learn the secrets of boxing.
The most important thing, lighting.
I started to feel like I was living a double life, where half the day I was learning the art of boxing, and the other half I was training for a fitness challenge that didn't really exist yet. But I was seeing lots of improvements in both areas, and slowly starting to see really good times in the marine fitness test.
It looks like I'm gonna have to learn how to jump higher.
But there was only 2 days until the fight and 3 days until the challenge. I was running out of time and I wasn't sure that I'd really be able to show off my full potential. Doing all this training was definitely toughening my mind, but was having the opposite effect on my body. Each day was getting harder, and the difficulty of the skills I was was learning kept increasing too, and then I was down to the day before the fight. This is when we would start getting into it and I would learn to take some punches. With this exercise, my job was to dodge. However, I was surprised by how difficult this actually was. And these are just jabs, this isn't even his full potential.
Holy crap. The hits kind of took me by surprise. I've never been punched in the face before. Got hit like 8 times.
And for the first time, I actually got to see what his full potential looked like. I knew he was stronger than me, but I wasn't expecting this.
I'm scared to fight Paul. I'm getting the worst blisters on my feet. They're bad.
And then it came time for the next part of training, which was to actually get hit.
Essentially, Sam is gonna beat us up. We're just gonna work on getting hit.
A while ago I mentioned that monks have discovered a lot of incredible things, including something called the steel jacket technique, where they essentially learn to take a hit without letting it hurt them at all. I was shown how to brace to reduce the impact and slowly becoming more used to it, but this was nothing compared to the power that I was gonna experience. And finally, it came to the day of the fight. To say I was nervous was a bit of an understatement. Like I said before, I'd never been in a fight before. I had no idea what to expect, and suddenly 6 days of training wasn't seeming like a lot.
I'm about to box someone with 20 pounds on me with a longer reach. My only chance is just to be able to take it. This is gonna be painful. I'm scared.
I braced myself mentally and set out there to do my best. I felt like I was going from 0 to 100, but it was only about to get worse. And as soon as the fight began...
Guys, everything above the waist, nothing behind the head. I want a clean fight. Touch gloves, let's go.
Paul immediately started going his hardest. Everything was coming at me so fast, I was forgetting all the training I had done. I was trying to fight back and also defend myself. I was trying to hold up my form and all the techniques I was taught, but as I was getting thrown around, it was becoming harder and harder for me to concentrate. Paul was landing significantly more hits than I was, and even when I would land, they wouldn't hit hard. And as everything was going down, there came a significant moment where I tried to dodge, but Paul outsmarted me and saw it coming. It was at this moment the ref pulled me aside to see if I was okay. I felt extremely dizzy in a way that I hadn't before, but I thought back to my goal and I knew that I wanted to keep going. I told Paul not to feel bad and to keep going as hard as he possibly could.
Someone's getting knocked out.
I kept fighting back as best as I could, and here you could notice I would start to flinch a lot more over time, and then I took another fatal hit. I decided to call the fight. I was in pain and I didn't want to get more hurt.
Oh, is he bleeding?
I still had to do the rematch, the fitness test.
When he hit me that one time, it was like in the movies. I got hit, I couldn't see anything. It was just like there's stars everywhere.
And so after getting cleaned up, it was now time for everything that this was building up for. Paul and I flew back down to San Francisco where I met up with my friend Sean, who had a crazy challenge in mind. We were all gonna do the impossible and lift 1,000,000 pounds. And it was a competition to see who could finish first.
My shoulders and chest burn. Yeah, this shirt's definitely coming off.
Since there were 3 of us, the way that it would work was each of us would have to lift 33,000 pounds. That means we would each have to do 800 push-ups, 300 pull-ups, and 963 squats. The last challenge we did took around 45 minutes. For all we knew, this could take hours, and we didn't know how many.
I'm unwell. This is rough. I am deceased.
Are you gonna beat me?
We'll have to see, Tyler. We will have to see.
It was definitely not easy.
The pull-ups are pretty hard.
I knew if I was going to win this challenge, I would have to push through a lot of pain. And where I really excelled at was the squats. We would switch through all the exercises in 15-minute intervals. And when it came to squats, I wouldn't stop for 15 minutes straight, doing hundreds at a time. My mind went blank. All I knew is I wasn't going to stop until I won this challenge. And not only was I just competing against Sean, but also Paul, who's doing it incredibly well. It had already been 2 hours, and by this point, doing pull-ups, I could only do a couple at a time. But despite me giving it my absolute best, at this point, it was still a very close call. However, I started to take the lead.
I just finished 963 squats.
By this point, I was the only one to completely finish an exercise, but that was short-lived.
I just finished 300 pull-ups.
Eventually, it all came down to the push-ups. Literally everything I've worked for the past week had come down to this moment.
800 push-ups.
I had actually won.
100 more push-ups and like 200 more squats, baby.
I managed to finish with a time of 10 minutes ahead of Paul.
What a way to finish.
And Sean was not too far behind that time either.
This time? 340.
Sometimes you can try and prepare for anything that gets thrown at you, but sometimes it's about throwing yourself into things you're not prepared for and figuring out a way to get through.
I have COVID.